It was November 19th, 2018, and football was about to change forever. Monday Night Football, Week 11, and two of the hottest teams in the league were about to clash. But the game far exceeded its billing. That night we saw over 1,000 combined yards. The quarterbacks put up a total of 891 passing yards and 10 passing touchdowns between them in a 54 to 51 point shootout. But more than just the Kansas City Chiefs losing, defense as a whole in the NFL was shaken to its core. Because these weren't even bad defenses. Even with both of these units giving up 50 plus in this game, they still finished as the 20th and 24th ranked defenses in points allowed that season. That's not good by any stretch, but this was not the case of two tragically awful defenses. This was the case of defense as a whole simply not having the answers to the tests that the offense was giving them. And since that game, defense has changed radically in the NFL from a schematic perspective. And the biggest change is the emergence of the light box. In order to counter the threats that a modern offense can pose, defenses are defending the run down an entire player and somehow getting away with it. Pulling that off might seem like a magic trick, but as with everything in football, it all comes back to scheme, technique, and fundamentals. So let's break down the light box revolution. So what went wrong for both defenses in that game? Well, in a game with over 100 points scored, the only real answer is that pretty much everything fell apart. But the overall takeaway from this game is that quarterbacks and offenses were getting too good. Neither team rushed for more than 100 yards, so due to the fact that these passing games did what they did to these defenses more or less single-handedly, defensive football needed to figure out how to take away the modern spread passing attack. The Chiefs-Rams game was by no means the coming out party for the modern spread offense in the NFL. The influences were clear for many years before that night, but it may have been the last straw that defenses needed before they made drastic changes. Now, before we go any farther, I do want to define a spread offense. There's a bunch of different definitions for this that you could use. Some coaches would only use the term to describe an offense that is 4 or 5 receivers and those like wild Josh Heupel type splits for the receivers, and that might be what a spread offense is in its purest form, but the core principle of a spread offense is that you should design your scheme to attack every blade of grass on the field. While the pure spread offense isn't really dominant in the NFL, the influence of the philosophy of spread systems has permeated throughout the league. Quarterbacks are getting better, yes, but offenses are also better than ever at stressing defenses with designer coverage beaters and passing concepts. Simply put, when people say that the NFL has been taken over by the spread passing game, they're referring to the sheer leap in sophistication and the sequencing of concepts from the passing attack. And the passing game has exploded because of it. League-wide trends show this increased dominance through the air as well. From 2006 to 2018, first down pass rate rose over 4.5%, and first down yards per attempt climbed from under 6 to over 6.4. Now I know that might sound like a small change, but again, these changes are taking place over a massive league-wide sample size, and it shows a momentous change in philosophy across the NFL. Offenses were passing the ball more than ever, and they were getting more out of it when they did. 2015 marked the first year in league history where offenses passed the ball on first down more than they ran it, and that feat was repeated in 2016, 2018, and 2020. The game of football was being radically changed. The passing attack was taking over the NFL, and I don't think there's a single game that showed that more clearly on a national stage than the Rams and Chiefs did in 2018. So how did NFL defenses address the passing explosion that was taking over the league? Well, they changed how they defend the run. Now, if you want to understand what changed, we have to understand the status quo that was so vulnerable to the passing explosion. So let's go back to 2015. This is a great example of how the run used to be defended. Despite this being more of a passing look with 3 receivers with wide splits, the Patriots matched the 6-man core from the Seahawks with 7 box defenders. They have a guy in every gap between the Seahawks blockers. This is what is referred to as a heavy box or a gapped out box. And this philosophy ensures that you can get downhill quickly. There's not a ton of processing required, you just need to aggressively attack your gap and go get the ball. And this was the meta in the NFL. Stopping the run meant that you had to get numbers into the box and place a guy in every single gap. It wasn't just seen as the best way to stop the run, it was overwhelmingly the primary way that it was done. Now, this did mean that you needed to have an extra defender in the box. As we can see here, the Patriots have 7 defenders against the Seahawks 6 blockers, but again, that was just the way that things were done. If you wanted to stop the run, which trust me, every defense in the history of the sport wants to do that, then this was the cost of doing business. But the result of that extra guy in the box means that you're kind of limited into giving single high coverage presentations, at least on early downs. You need to get a safety into the box so you have the numbers. Think Cam Chancellor down there. So the only other logical way to play your safety is to put them deep in the middle of the field, and that was the Earl Thomas role. If you can stop the run successfully, then you can earn the right to mix things up and get more creative with your safeties. But the anchor on the creativity of defensive masterminds was the fact that they were restricted in what they could do because they had to get that extra guy in the box. So many of your chess pieces were already locked in place. So going back to that Rams-Chiefs game, Kansas City had a loaded box nearly 70% of the time on first down. Even though the Rams weren't killing them on the ground, only 18% of their yardage came through the ground attack that night, but the Chiefs still didn't feel comfortable mixing it up and trying a lighter box. Playing light boxes on early downs was simply not seen as a tenable strategy. If you could get them into an obvious passing situation, then you could get more creative and pull that extra guy out of the box and use him in your coverages, but on a neutral down and distance, you had to load the box. But fast forward to 2025, and light boxes on early downs are a foundational defensive principle. The 2025 Seahawks won the Super Bowl on the back of their dominant defense, and they were the best run defense in the league that year as well. They were first in EPA per rush allowed, explosive runs allowed, yards per carry, any relevant rushing statistic, they dominated. So conventional wisdom would say that they must be loading up the box to get those results. Well, not at all. Again, the Chiefs loaded up the box just under 70% of the time, even though they were facing a very pass-happy attack from the Rams. But the 2025 Seahawks, throughout all of their first down snaps in the season, they played their run defense with a loaded box just 10.6% of the time. That is actually unbelievable. So how did the Seahawks achieve these baffling results? Well, let's watch this in action from the culmination of that 2025 season in the Super Bowl. On this play, the Patriots are in a condensed under-center formation, and it's 2nd and 1. Everything should be telling the defense that they need to load up the box, but they don't. Mike Macdonald keeps both of his safeties high, and he plays with a light box like he has consistently throughout the season. The Seahawks here are in a 5-2 front, which they get to by moving their linebacker to play edge, and then bringing Nick Emanwari down as a linebacker. But regardless of who is there, they have 7 guys in the box, and the Patriots have 7 blockers. The Seahawks don't have enough players in the box to account for every single gap, so they're going to have to play with different rules. And the biggest change from a run-fit perspective is that the Seahawks aren't playing their gaps as much as they're playing the blocks in front of them. If we pause it right here when the running back is getting the ball, no one is getting upfield. The Seahawks front is not trying to get upfield and shoot their gap and get that early penetration to disrupt the ground game. Rather, they're just trying to hold their blocks. And we can see this most clearly with Byron Murphy at the center of our screen. He is responsible for this A-gap, and he's getting a down block from the center. And he doesn't charge into the backfield or work to shed the block immediately, but rather he's engaging and trying to hold his ground and maintain his leverage. and this doesn't change until the last second. Now, there is a technique called two-gapping, which is often used in a lot of odd front defenses. We're not really going to get into that, but suffice to say that this is not two-gapping. When you're two-gapping, you play the block head up, and you're responsible for the gap on either side of you. And while that sounds great and super efficient, it is a very difficult technique to play and consistently be square to read the ball as it comes down so fast. So the technique here is what coaches call playing a gap and a half. Murphy has his primary gap, which in this case is the backside A gap, but once the ball cuts away from him and he's no longer needed to control that gap, his job is to shed over and help in his secondary gap. And that is what he does here to help with the tackle on the running back. And these are some of the principles that make the light box run fit work. Now, of course, there are a ton of different variations and schematic approaches to fitting the run, and there's a bunch of different variations even within the light box umbrella. The complexity of run fits is tremendous at the NFL level, as every team wants to be multiple and adapt to the schemes that the offense is throwing at them. Again, this is the kind of stuff that coaches build their careers on. But from a very high level in the modern NFL, teams are defending the run with more patience, schematic variety, and processing than they did before. Instead of having one player per gap, the goal is to have gap responsibilities be more flexible, and more importantly, have those responsibilities overlap. No one player is solely responsible for a gap. They will have help from other players who can shed off of their blocks and flow towards the ball. And this overlapping of responsibilities also carries into the secondary. Because they are defending the run in a more patient and slow way, lightbox run fits also give your secondary more time to react. By working to contain and slow down the ball, now modern run defense can rely more heavily on every defensive player. With this extra time, your corners and safeties can now come down and provide extra support. Now, there are some evident downsides to this way of fitting the run. You're naturally going to be less aggressive, you're going to get fewer tackles for loss, and I know that Byron Murphy made that look easy, but you need to have defensive linemen who boast incredible anchor to not give up easy, consistent yardage. That's not an easy assignment to do over and over all game long. But defensive coordinators have also attacked this problem using scheme. When you watch so many of these defenses, if they're struggling to stop the run, defensive coordinators are quick to turn to a run blitz or a stunt, and that often returns the run fit structure to more of that aggressive single gap nature that we discussed previously, and it allows you to get those TFLs and disrupt the run game. And that seems to be the way that modern defenses look to stop the run. Now, of course, as with everything in football, this wasn't invented recently, and it absolutely hasn't outright replaced the old school single gap method. You will still see that run by every NFL team. But light boxes have gotten much more popular in the modern NFL, and it's become an essential tool for defenses to fight back against more sophisticated passing attacks. And the rise of the light box has also transformed the math game for offensive coordinators. Before the battle for points and yards, NFL teams are dueling to establish the terms of engagement. If the offense can successfully run the ball against a light box, then they can force the defense to adjust and play coverage structures that just can't hold up against a modern passing attack consistently. And that is what so many offenses in the NFL right now are trying to do. We've seen the rise of 12 and 13 personnel. That means getting extra tight ends on the field. And we've also seen a return to heavier formations for this very reason. The yards on the ground are a lot less important than the effect that having a successful rushing attack has. Since its high watermark in 2018, first down pass percentage has come right back down to where it was in the early 2000s. Establishing the run is back, and it's a better strategy than ever. Because if you can't establish the run and at least force the defense to risk some run blitzes and stunts to slow you down, then you get results like we saw in Super Bowl 59 and Super Bowl 60. Those were dominant defensive performances that left a solid offense in the Chiefs and an elite one in the Patriots completely helpless in the biggest game of the year. Yes, both the Seahawks and the Eagles have excellent talent on all three levels of their defenses, but they are also elite at defending the run with a light box. That means that they consistently earn that extra coverage defender and could basically pretend like every down was a passing down as far as their coverages are concerned. That is a cheat code. So, as we move on from the 2025 season and look towards next year, what are some takeaways that we can have from this resurgence in elite defense? Well, I have a few. First of all, defensive tackles matter more than ever. If you have an elite run stuffer who can not only hold up consistently at the point of attack, but can also make plays against the ground game, then that is the kind of player who can unlock light box run fits. That is a tremendously valuable role, and it's just increasing in value. But I also think that offenses will continue their trend of loading up the box. This has been the obvious counter by offensive play callers as they attempt to force you out of those light boxes, and I think that this will only intensify. That means more fullbacks, extra offensive linemen, and multiple tight end sets. I think that's going to become the norm. We've seen a resurgence in downhill power football, and I don't think that's going to change at all. That is the natural weakness of this style of defense, and they're going to attack it. But lastly, and I think most importantly, the value of your defensive play caller has reached an all-time peak. When you look at the last two Super Bowl winners, the minds of Vic Fangio and Mike Macdonald made those teams who they were. If you're going to run a light box, you need to have someone who can time up the blitzes and stunts that you need to disrupt the ground game once it gets going, and you also need someone who's going to be able to maximize the extra coverage defender that you give them. More decisions means more control, and who you give that control to matters more than ever. The last two Super Bowls have not been decided by elite quarterbacks or offensive gurus or absurd offensive weapons, but they've been decided by a team's ability to stop the run from a light box and maximize on all of the benefits that you get from that. That revolution has already swept over the NFL, and I don't think that will be changing anytime soon. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to all of my supporters on Patreon who make this content possible. Thanks for your support, and go Hawks.